Matchup, Graz, as we turn to Wild Card week between the Packers and Eagles on Sunday. Lots of injuries to watch out for in this one. Let's start with Jordan Love. What more can you tell us about his status?
Jordan Love left the game Sunday with an elbow injury. Head coach Matt LaFleur said after the game that he could have gone back in, but they were just playing it safe. Love said after the game he was not concerned about this lingering into next week, and based on the conversations I've had around this situation, I do not get the sense that Jordan Love is in any danger of missing this week's playoff game. We'll see what the practice schedule looks like the next couple of days, but it sounds like he should be good to go. Not the case, unfortunately, with wide receiver Christian Watson, who suffered a torn ACL in that loss to the Bears on Sunday. He will obviously be out for the remainder of this season and has a long recovery ahead of him. The Packers have a lot of wide receivers and they really like them, but they view Watson, and their opponents do too, as a difference maker down the field, a field stretcher type, and a factor in the red zone. He will be difficult to replace. And here's one we're watching pretty closely. Jalen Hurts, Eagles quarterback, still has not practiced since leaving the December 22nd game against Washington with a concussion. He's making his way through the concussion protocol slowly. It's important to note they rested guys last week, but he would not have been cleared in time to play in that game, even if they needed to win it. So tomorrow is a huge day. If he's able to return to the practice field in any capacity, that will tell you he's making progress through the concussion protocol and has a chance to be cleared in time for Sunday's game. If you do not see him on the practice field tomorrow, there is reason to be concerned that he might not be cleared in time for Sunday's game.
I mean, that's really interesting, and Graz, we'll definitely pay attention to what happens there tomorrow. Dan, your reaction to that news on Jalen Hurts, and then also what's key for the Packers defense?
I agree with Graz. Tomorrow is everything. If he's on the field tomorrow, not a lot of concern. We'll see how they play with them. If he's not on the field tomorrow, obviously there's an elevated concern. I think one of the keys in this game is how Green Bay handles a lot of the RPO game and the overhang defender. This is a 3-by-0, 3 to a side, and you create angles and numbers. We know that, but the overhang player is the key, the guy in the hash. How far away is he from the third receiver or that bubble receiver? This time he's a little bit tucked into that offensive line of scrimmage, that tackle. This is easy for Jalen Hurts to kick the ball to perimeter. And they're going to constantly present this situation to Green Bay defensively. Now it's a little bit of a widened bunch. Now that overhanging defender, see how farther out he is rather than attached to Jordan Mailata's hip? Jalen Hurts is then going to hand the football off. They're not going to kick that ball out to the perimeter. They're not going to force it. And now they have advantages in the run. And then these 2-by-2 RPOs that they ran against them to start the season. This is a very simple read for Jalen Hurts again in their run-pass option. Hand it off or throw it. What that defender does. If he sloughs in, they're going to throw double slants up top. Remember, no Jair Alexander. If he hangs outside and tries to play it slow to go, well, this is why they have one of the best, if not the best, run games. Because they have so much space for those double teams. So it'll be interesting to see how Jeff Hafley that overhang defender is such a big deal with how they toy with them, is a little bit more man. They walk them up to the line of scrimmage. That's a big focal point.
Arguably, too, a weakness for this Packers defense in terms
Correct.
of the linebackers and coverage. So assuming Jalen Hurts plays and thinking about this passing attack, look, if you have A.J. Brown one-on-one, go ball, you're going to throw it to A.J.
Yeah.
Brown. But I do think that the Eagles need to focus on attacking where the Packers are weak, and that's the middle of the field. Because outside the numbers, they've actually been the best pass defense in football, even without Alexander, their first in EPA per play.
Yeah.
But over the middle of the field, that drops to 22nd, and it shows up on tape.
Do you think Philly will, though? Because that's not necessarily what they do.
So I don't think it'll be overwhelming because they do love those outside the numbers targets, obviously, when you have A.J. Brown. But there are things that they get to, the slants off the RPOs, I think of.
Yep.
In-breakers with Devontae Smith and A.J. And then I think this could be a big Dallas Goedert game.
Yeah, the mesh where they sit the guy behind the mesh, that could be a big one as well.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit. It's about knowing your opponent, right? And that just is where the Packers are the weakest.
Hawk, let's go to the Green Bay side of the ball. Without Christian Watson, how do you see them adjusting their game plan?
Yeah, that's going to be the big question, right, for this offense, especially LaFleur, because that last level, the way that receivers push that, is what balances the entire pass game. Now, I don't think they can replace them wholly, but there'll be elements that they can use with Dontavian Wicks. And when I went back into the film, like there were moments he hit over 20 miles per hour. Here you're going to see Watson in a stomp concept versus cover one, press. Okay, if that safety is going to play the middle, we're going to take advantage of that. Here goes Wicks doing the same play against the same coverage where Love finds them almost immediately, because if you're going to play that middle of the field, can you stretch that defense that way? This is from the preseason, but you're looking for elements that also feel like, okay, they can match what Watson does. Here's another one, cover two. If he's going to play with his back to you, and try to play that number 2 receiver and beyond, can you get down the sideline?
That's Watson.
That's Watson.
Okay.
Here goes Wicks again. Same thing. So he's going to split those 2 receivers, and the moment he starts to give attention to that number 2, can he make a play down the field? Now, Wicks' 40 time isn't like Watson's, but he plays so much faster than that.
I love that point because we've been talking about how, Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, obviously very different skill sets, so who could potentially replicate what Christian Watson does? A lot of the stuff Wicks did that's similar in terms of the goes and the deep overs. You saw last year, he has not been as big a part of an offense this year, but he's going to have to be.
How tall is he? How tall is Wicks? Anybody?
He's big.
I think he's around 6'1".
So he's got a big enough frame
He
to
has
go
size
vertical.
and speed to talk.
I like it.
That's something to look out for. Remember, you guys, the Packers won as the 7 seed in the wild card round last season. All of their 7 seeds since 2020 have gone a combined 0-7. We'll keep an eye on Jalen Hurts' status, though. The big day is tomorrow to figure out whether Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were unbelievable, but the defense struggled ultimately. Too little, too late for Cincinnati. It's still worth giving some love to the performances of Burrow and Chase. My goodness, this season, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase became the first teammates since the 1970 merger to have one lead the league outright in pass yards and touchdowns, while the other leads in receiving yards and touchdowns. Chase also becomes the 6th player since the merger to win the Triple Crown. Just the 6th player. Dan, when you look at the Bengals this season, what went wrong there?
Oh, their defense. And I do not believe that firing Lou Anarumo is just going to solve this. I think Lou Anarumo is a really, really good football coach and really good defensive mind. I think the defense has to, 1, address the internal part of their defensive line. They consistently got their ball run on them too much. Number 2, they got to figure out how to get the secondary to play to the style of a couple years ago. Cam Taylor-Britt was like hot and cold this year, up and down. He had some really good moments and then some my goodness moments. I don't think the safety play was nearly as good as they had expected, but it really starts. They got to get their front in a dominant player outside of Trey Hendrickson, but in totality, they got to improve the overall talent level of the defense.
The front, but all 3 levels, if we're being honest, need help with this defense. I mean, what happened with the Bengals was on their Super Bowl run, they had this all-time free agent signing class, and then some of those players got older, some of them left, DJ Reader and Jesse Bates, and they made bad choices replacing them, both in terms of the free agent signings and the players that they've drafted. Because this defense is expensive, you guys. It's the 4th most expensive defense, I believe, in football. And these are the draft picks. When you
the corners they drafted haven't necessarily.
Dax Hill got hurt, and but aside from that, you're just not seeing, particularly on the defensive line, I think you're just not seeing those young players step up the way you need them to when you want to spend money elsewhere. And then the signings haven't worked out, and I agree with you about Anarumo. Lou Anarumo is one of the best defensive game planners we have. I think he's going to be good somewhere else, but he had a hand in picking, developing those players, and I think that's a big part of the reason why he's no longer with Cincinnati.
Yeah, Graz, let's spin ahead a little bit here. What are Cincinnati's biggest questions entering the offseason?
Well, who can they sign and for how much, right? Like Jamar Chase is still looking for a big contract extension. If he wants to make more than Justin Jefferson does, this year certainly strengthened his case as he led the league in everything. But they also have the T. Higgins situation. He's unrestricted free agent. So can they sign both? Joe Burrow has been very vocal about, wanting the team to bring back Higgins, and obviously he doesn't want to lose Chase either. So that's a balancing act with regard to the budget and the salary cap. And then you flip it over to the defense. Do they have enough money to rebuild the defense? Hendrickson wants a new deal. He was demanding a trade earlier in the offseason. So if you lose him and you've already fired your coordinator, you have to rebuild the defense basically from scratch and with very little salary cap room. So for the Bengals, budgeting, I think, is the biggest challenge they might face this offseason.
I would love for this situation for everybody involved to do something that maybe they're not used to doing. The Bengals, T. Higgins as well. Your quarterback plays the best with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on the field. And for T. Higgins, you're going to put your best numbers forward whenever you're playing with Joe Burrow. I understand going to get your money, would never tell a player not to do that. But at the same time, when you sign with the Bengals in free agency, it's not going to probably break the bank always, especially when you have Jamar Chase demanding a bunch on the other side. But you will see the majority of your money in a contract. Once the Bengals value at something, history shows that they will continue to pay you, even on the back end, when a lot of other teams will try to get out of those contracts as they get more expensive on the back end.
That's good perspective. You're talking about how much better Jamar Chase is when T. Higgins is on the field. Chase averages more than 12 receiving yards per game when Higgins played this season. And there were even a lot of games where we didn't see T. Higgins. So
I hope they can keep him together. That was so sick.
They're so
I also
good,
want him to go to New England.
I was going to say, T. Higgins is so
He's earned it. Whatever he does, he's
so
earned it.
good,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
some team is going to want to give him
Give
so
him a
much
lot of money. If I got a young quarterback, it's like I
my
want to throw
God.
it to
New
that
England,
guy.
Here's the
Carolina.
tough part about the Bengals, too, in this situation. They're so, equipped to find receiver talent. You think about Chad Johnson, 2nd round, Hushman Zeta,
AJ
7th,
Green.
Sanu, 3, Marvin Jones is a 5th rounder.
Andrew Hawkins.
Andrew Hawkins.
Andrew
out the
Hawkins, there
street
we go.
On a
All
couch.
right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, Tyler Boyd.
The record
T. Higgins
speaks
was
for
a 2nd
itself.
rounder.
Yeah, they
on.
do find really good
Yoshua.
players.
They're
But
good
those
at
guys
it.
He's
aren't
a good
key.
player.
They're not T. And also, Joe Burrow is not going to want to hear,
Yeah.
we're going to go find. No,
Yeah.
I have a T.
The
Higgins.
marriage with Joe's play style, those aggressive tight window throws. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just.
And they drafted Burton from Bama this year, and he not necessarily handled the end of the season ideally either.